base of it has not changed. The adaptation of more modern styles into it, added to it, has changed. Playing with the Dirty Dozen Brass Band, I participated in that change, in that evolution. My name is Gregory Davis. Most people call me Blody. I was going into the 7th grade, and I had decided I wanted to take a music class, and I thought that I wanted to be a drummer. But when I got to the first class, the first day, there probably were about 25, 30, 40 people in the class, and half of them wanted to be drummers. And then that didn't necessarily bother me too much, but then the teacher told us, well, you're not going to get a drum, you're going to get a drum pad, because drummers start out on a drum pad. I didn't know that, with a rubber base to it. And I said, okay, I don't want to be a drummer no more. So then he said, okay, well, what do you think you want to play? Pointed to one case, looked like a briefcase, an attaché case or something like that. Didn't know what was in it, but I just thought, I want that case because it looked like something that I could carry. And unbeknownst to me, it had in it a cornet, which most people will probably identify a trumpet before a cornet, but essentially the same thing. And that began my journey, on trumpet, on the cornet. My first music teacher was a guy named Alvin Thomas, who was actually a jazz saxophonist, and he played flute also. He taught the class in such a way that it made me interested in wanting to play. I was progressing pretty well in the first year. In the second year, I actually, made the band, and that kind of sort of got things started for me. Played in all of the school bands. The marching band was the main attraction, and the concert band, and back then they called it a stage band, which was the jazz band. And I think that I started to develop a little faster than some of the other students who were taking music at the time. And by the time of my 9th grade year, I started to play in outside bands outside of the school bands, dance bands, R&B bands, funk bands, some jazz bands or whatever. And by the time I was 13 and a half, 14, I was playing in bands that were performing in nightclubs. Wasn't supposed to be going in the nightclubs, but I was playing well enough that some of the older guys wanted me to be in the band. From the time I was about 13 and a half, 14, I started earning some money. Never had to ask my parents for an allowance from that point on. As I said, at that time I was in junior high, then going into senior high is when I really got involved in New Orleans music, playing New Orleans brass band music, New Orleans traditional music. Primarily because I had a good friend named Leroy Jones, who was under the tutelage of Danny Barker. Danny Barker had gotten the Fairview Baptist Church band started because he wanted to make sure that there were younger people coming up in the tradition of New Orleans music. Well, Leroy was one of his better students, Leroy Jones, Lucian Barber. So anyway, I started hanging out with Leroy, playing in his band, and I was actually a year older than him, but he was more into that. And because we were at the same high school, at St. Augustine High School, we became pretty good friends. I was in the R&B side of music. He was in the brass band, New Orleans traditional style stuff. So we sort of became friends and meshed, learned a little bit from each other. I think I probably picked up more from him than he did from me. What I do with the Dirty Dozen Brass Band is lead the show. So I think whatever I have now used as being an entertainer, the front man, I think I picked that up way back then when I was 13, 14 years old, seeing what it took to actually get the crowd involved. Here in New Orleans, I was able to participate in all kinds of music. Whatever music was happening, and I was able to learn the music and have a chance to participate in. Most of the time I grabbed it. intention was to learn as much traditional New Orleans music as we could. But at the time we were getting started, which was the mid to late 70s, that style of music had started to kind of play out, wear out. You know, they were not, they being the New Orleans patrons, were not really into that. So then we, the Dirty Dozen, started playing other more modern jazz, more music that we thought people might want to dance to. When we came on the scene, there were maybe two of the older brass bands that were still in existence back then. One was maybe the Onward Brass Band and the Olympia Brass Band. Olympia was the band that whatever younger guys wanted to participate in a brass band, the Olympia Brass Band was the band that they wanted to be associated with, because Olympia at the time, they were really, really tight. They had a certain sound, and they were gigging, they were traveling internationally. There were really no other brass bands happening at that time. So then we, as the Dirty Dozen, just started to rehearse, because we thought we were preparing as musicians maybe to get a spot in the Olympia Brass Band or whatever of the older brass band. We would get called, you know, as sidemen, you know, to participate, you know, play a series of gigs, because maybe the other trumpet player was sick, couldn't make the gig, maybe the other sousaphone player, you know, so we were subbing. But we knew that to be a sub, you had to be prepared to play the music that they were playing. But what we found was that there was a demand, there was a need for another brass band. We soon found that when we would play the music that we had rehearsed, you know, the music of Duke Ellington, the music of you know, Aretha Franklin, James Brown, whatever, you know, whatever we wanted to rehearse, we incorporated it into the group of musicians that we had. And then we mixed that music with the traditional New Orleans music. Well, what we found was that the younger generation that was probably closer to our age than they were to the older generation, they wanted to hear this new stuff that we were playing. The Glass House. The Glass House was a small black club in the uptown area of New Orleans. It was actually, it was 2719 South Saratoga, which was a rough area of town, rough. But for us, it became our laboratory. We would play there every Monday night. The gig wouldn't start until, it was on Monday night, so the music wouldn't start, the show wouldn't start until Monday Night Football went out, because, you know, people were watching Monday Night Football, they weren't coming out. So if the Monday night game ended at 10 o'clock, the gig might start at 10:30. If the game went into overtime, the gig might start at 11 o'clock or whatever. But we would typically play there, till 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. Monday nights at the Glass House became something that we did consistently for about 5 or 6 years. And it came about at a time when we were starting to get a international reputation at Dirty Dozen. And so we would always be able to make it back, if we did take a trip, make it back to be able to make the Monday night gig. The Glass House became the place to be. You're not just playing for yourself, you're playing for that audience that has come out to see you, you know, and a lot of times, you know, people, especially, you know, real sophisticated musicians will say, yeah, I'm playing this music for myself because it soothes my soul and satisfies. Well, all that might be true, but you want other people to hear and appreciate what you're doing. What keeps the Dirty Dozen going has been the constant flow of work, of gigs, of recordings, of, you know, things to do musically. And we're not hanging on by a thread. You know, we're in our 44th year. We still do 180, close to 200 shows per year, you know, which is kind of sort of insane. But some of us, in addition to doing that, do other things. I used to take care of the business for the band. I front the band and all. But once I got involved in, booking stuff for Jazz Fest and booking stuff for casinos and teaching at Loyola and doing other stuff, I had to step aside and I turned it over to Roger, because I did not want it to be that I was making decisions to not do shows or not do gigs, because I was overwhelmed with the other stuff that I, had to do. And I think that was good, because it allowed the band to just continue to function, and do as much work as, would be presented. I don't think we really had any idea that we meant something to the music and the musicians here in New Orleans until we had to start replacing some of the members. I truly did not have any idea that other younger musicians were learning Dirty Dozen music until we put it out there that we needed to find a new trombonist and a new sousaphone player. That's when we had an idea that other people were interested in what we were doing. Not only interested, that the other bands had popped up, first of all, to take the work that we could not do in New Orleans anymore because we started traveling, and then enough people had learned so-called Dirty Dozen music that we were able to find some replacements. That's when we started to have, some conversation about, hey, maybe we made an impression. And then as time went on, now that it's 40 years later, when we started, maybe there were 2 of the older brass bands, still in existence in the city. Now, not only in New Orleans, but really all over the world, there's a whole crop of other bands that have copied and emulated the Dirty Dozen. I'll be 65 in January. My kids have asked me, hey, when are you going to retire? Well, I have no concept of what retirement, I don't ever want to get up and not have something to do. I got involved in a lot of other stuff besides playing music. I taught at Loyola for, maybe 10 or so years. I book entertainment for Jazz Fest. I was booking entertainment for the Essence Festival. Right now I have, I started up another company. I book entertainment for 3 of the Harrah's, Caesars, casinos. I do other stuff, and so life happens, and those other opportunities that come up in life will sometimes lead you into other areas, into other things. But I know that my lifeblood, is music, period. Just being able to play, to be involved in either playing shows or booking shows or putting shows together, is what I look forward to, every day. The music, I think you have to live the music. You have to live the song. You got to live the food, here in New Orleans. You can feel it as it's happening. You can explain it, but you really can't explain it. All right.